Hi everyone. Did you ever wonder what academic writing really is? Well, L. Lenny Irwin is trying to help us understand it. So if you want to take a deep dive into this article with me, then come on into my classroom and let's see. Today we're going to be talking about this great article in an open textbook called Writing Spaces, Readings on Writing, Volume 1. And this is an article by L. Lenny Irwin called What is Academic Writing? You can see the links here, and it is available for your own download and own reading here. If you don't have the article and want to download it and read it before we go through it, you can, or you can have your own article and follow along with me as we go. It's a great article. So here we go. What is Academic Writing by L. Lenny Irwin? He starts out with an introduction to explain for us the academic writing task. And here in the second body paragraph, he gives us the secret. And he tells us it's the secret. He says, so here's the secret. Your success with academic writing depends upon how well you understand what you are doing as you write, and then how you approach the writing task. And this idea of understanding what we are doing as we write is going to inform a lot of the information in the article. We have to understand what we're doing in order to do it well. So when we move to the next page, page 4, Irwin is going to go into myths about writing. And myths are really interesting. A lot of us believe these myths as if they're true. So let's look at each one of these myths one by one. Myth number 1 is the paint by numbers myth. Some of you might not be that familiar with the paint by numbers. Paint by numbers is something that we do when basically we're told specifically where every single color goes. Most of us would paint the sky blue and the grass green and a tree brown, and that's basically what a paint by numbers picture is, where someone tells us exactly what to do. And for something like the sky and the grass and a tree, it's pretty easy to understand. Something like a butterfly, though, with a lot of different color choices, is a lot more complicated, and maybe you want to have a purple, yellow, orange butterfly or a green, pink, blue butterfly, and these are both kinds of butterflies. So Irwin goes on to say that paint by numbers for essay is in fact a myth, and he says here that some writers believe that they must perform certain steps in a particular order. He's talking about paint by numbers as an order, that there is in fact a specific way to write essays in terms of we have to do the title first, then we have to do the hook, then we have to do the thesis. And this is, in fact, not true. He says here, rather than being in a lockstep linear process, think of a marching band in which we're all going in the exact same step by step. That's not what writing is. We all have a different process. It is, in fact, recursive. Recursive means we go 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's circular. We cycle through and repeat the various activities. Maybe we start with the title. Maybe we start with the hook. Maybe we start with the conclusion and work backwards. Maybe we start with a body. Maybe we do a body, then the intro, then a body, then the conclusion. Writing is, in fact, recursive, and that's what he's trying to say. We have to get over the idea that there is one way, one path, one linear way to do this, because it's just not true. The next myth that he goes into is myth number 2, and that is writers only start writing when they have everything figured out. And that is a huge myth, because writing, in fact, leads to figuring everything out. Most of us get our ideas when we write, and the more we write, the more ideas we get, and the more we develop. I will be telling you all semester, words on paper. Get your words on paper. The more you have words on paper, the more you can move those words and see those words and develop those words. Irwin says here, writers figure out much of what they want to write as they write it. Then he goes on to say you can come back to patch up the rough spots. This is why writing is in fact recursive. So myth number 1 and number 2 tie in together. Rarely do we sit down and have everything just boom from start to finish. That is in fact a myth. Then we go on to myth number 3, which is perfect from myth number 2, and that's perfect first drafts. There's no such thing. Non-writers have this idea that people sit down at the keyboard and words just flow from writers' fingertips, and it's all perfect, and the grammar is perfect, and everything is wonderful. That is just simply not true. Now, of course, sometimes grammar is better. I have good grammar, and my baseline grammar is probably better than your baseline grammar. But it's still not perfect, and I still make mistakes, and I still have to edit, and I still have to rewrite. Irwin goes on to say that we focus too much on the impossible task of making first drafts perfect. Or when we turn the page, we spend too little time and make them not good enough before we have people read them. It's a very tricky balance. Your work has to be understandable enough so that someone can read it to help you, to give you feedback. For first draft day, for peer review day, it has to be understandable, but it's not going to be perfect. When is your writing finished? When it's due. So we want to polish our grammar before it's due. We don't want to spend a lot of time making our drafts perfect when you're just going to come and have to cut anyway. That said, if you can't read it, if your verb tense is terrible, if nobody has any idea what you're saying, then that's no good anyway. So there's a really tricky balance here. But perfection is not going to happen. So we have to let that myth go. Myth number 4 is a great myth. Some got it, I don't. The genius fallacy. And I think students apply this myth not only to writing, but language use as well. I just can't write. I just don't have the language. I'm never going to be good about it. It's fixed. I might as well give it up. And this is in fact not true. Anyone can improve as a writer. Anyone can improve as a language user. Irwin says, with effort and study, you can improve as a writer. He says, I promise. I can promise too. If you put in the time and the effort, if you put in diligent study, if you do and practice good techniques, you can improve. Will you be a master? Maybe. Will you be excellent? Maybe. It depends. But can you improve? Absolutely. Can you be proficient? Absolutely. Can you get an A? Maybe not. Will you be a genius? Maybe not. Will you be excellent? Maybe not. But can you improve? Can you be proficient? Can you meet your needs? Can people understand you? Can you get your ideas across? Absolutely. With effort and study and good practice and efficient time management and doing good, diligent, effective techniques, you can improve your writing and your language use. I promise. Myth number 5 is one of my favorite myths, but it's a little tricky. Myth number 5 is good grammar is good writing. He says when people say I can't write, what they often mean is they have problems with grammatical correctness. Writing, however, is about more than just grammatical correctness. Now, that's true. However, what it doesn't mean is that writing is not about grammatical correctness. It's very important that we read this. It says writing, however, is about more than just grammatical correctness. And the key words in this sentence are more than just grammatical correctness. More than just grammatical correctness. So you have to have grammatical correctness. Grammatical correctness is baseline. It's the basic foundation of writing. So we start with good grammar. Once you have good grammar, we build from there. As I've been telling you all semester, good grammar is baseline. It doesn't mean good writing. Good grammar just means people can read what you have. Good grammar just means people can understand your ideas. Good grammar just means people understand your verb tense and what you're saying. Irwin says, good writing is a matter of achieving your desired effect upon an attended audience. Plus, as we saw in myth number 3, no one writes perfect first drafts. So we have to be able to have our good grammar to get our ideas across, but then we have to have good ideas and good analysis to get across in the first place. The next myth, myth 6, is about the 5-paragraph essay, and this is something that people are, educators and writers are arguing about right now, and kind of doesn't affect you quite as much. And he goes on to say that some people say to avoid it at all costs, that is the 5-paragraph essay, and others believe that no other way exists to write. And so for us, you've probably learned to write the 5-paragraph essay, and our first essay that we're doing can be a 5-paragraph or a 4-paragraph or a 6-paragraph essay. For our class, what we're using is we're doing the 5-paragraph essay idea as a foundation, but it doesn't really matter because for me personally, what I think is any essay format is a foundational thing, and what we learn to do is we learn to build essay upon building blocks. And so we're building our essay as something that can scale up. And so a small essay, like a 3-paragraph essay, has a particular format that we want to be able to scale up that can build into a 6-paragraph or a 12-paragraph or a 3-page or a 6-page or a 10-page essay. And so that's the way I particularly teach it. This isn't quite as important for our class. You can join in this debate if you want, or you'll see as you take other writing classes in the future. The next myth, myth number 7, is a really important myth, and you will encounter that in the different writing classes that you take, and that's never use I. Now, it's really tricky because here he talks about the formal stance of objectivity, and he says it implies a distrust of informality. So look at what he says next. Although some writing situations will call on you to avoid using I, much college writing can be done in a middle semi-formal style where it is okay to use I. So the key is we use I when it's appropriate to use I, and we don't use I when we don't use I. So the kind of essay is what dictates the point of view that we use. In our first essay, we're talking about a personal experience. There's no way you can talk about a personal experience without using an I. In our second essay, we're talking about our personal experience. And our third essay, we're going to be talking about something completely different. We're going to be talking about a place, and in that place, it's going to be an it. However, you are going to be at the it, so maybe you want to use an I. So it really depends on the assignment itself, and that's what we have to do. We can't take these rules as absolute, and I think that's the point of all of these myths. We can't just say this is a rule, this is an absolute, but we have to think and apply critical thinking to the ideas, and that is how we can decide whether or not this general rule is a good rule or it is in fact a myth. And so that's Irwin's 7 writing myths. Then he goes on at the bottom of page 5 to start talking about the academic writing situation, because now we understand some of the myths that many people have accepted over the years, and now we're going to think about the college classroom writing. So let's look then at page 6 and talk about what we're doing in page 6. And this is an interesting diagram here at the bottom, and he's talking about the complexities involved in the writing situation. And what he's talking about is the physical contact between the writers and the readers in the actual document or the computer if we're doing soft copy, and then the social contact that we have, the purposes that we have, the interpretation of the writers, the interpretation of the readers, the influence of the writers, the influence of the readers, the purpose of the writers, the purpose of the readers, the social aspect, the cultural aspect. So these are all different things that are taking place every single time we write something, which is really kind of interesting and should really open our eyes to the importance of understanding our audience and understanding the genre and the situation that we're writing in. So if I'm in a new area and I don't know anything about the social or cultural situation in which I'm writing, then my audience might not understand, because their influence and their purpose might be completely different than mine. So we can see how important this is for our audience and for our writers. So that's kind of fun. Then when we look at page 7, he talks about specifically some of the situations in breaking down that article. Now, because most of you didn't go to college in American high school, some of this might be new for you. And so let's just take a look at some of the things that he's breaking down. We've got our audience, and we always ask the question, who is our audience? And in our class, we've got our professor and our classmates, usually. As you go up in your writing classes, you might have other audiences. You might present at a conference, for example, in writing 1 or writing 2. Then we have what's the occasion or the context. And then we have an assignment, obviously. Then we have the question, what's your message? And he says it's to give your learning or interpretation. Then the purpose. The purpose is to show your learning and obviously to get a good grade. Let's not be silly. Of course, we care about grades in college. And then what kinds of documents? Sometimes we're using document, we're using essay, sometimes we're using other things. In our class, we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation. We're also going to have a poster session. So these are different kinds of things that we'll be using. And then he goes on to do a description at the bottom of the page and explain all the information. We're going to go on to talk about some research. We're not doing any research in this class. This would apply more to writing 1 and writing 2. Reading complex text. We are starting to do that in this class. We're just becoming, for the first time perhaps, really in English reading these complex texts, and it's hard. That's why we're going to be reading so much about reading and how to do it. And let's really take a look at this section right here on page 8, the ability to read complex text. Look at what he says. Your college writing typically asks you to write on unfamiliar topics. Some of the topics that we are writing about in our class are familiar, but then we're going to be moving into the unfamiliar, and the higher levels you go up, the more unfamiliar these topics will be. Then he goes on here to talk about, this is a very important point, your ability to write well will be based upon the quality of your reading. You can't write about something if you don't understand the something. You also have to be able to think critically as you read. So while you read, you have to think about. And he explains that thinking critically means separating fact from opinion, recognizing biases and assumptions, and making inferences. Inferences are how readers connect the dots. He defines inferences here for us. An inference is a belief or a statement about something unknown made on the basis of something known. Inferences can be very difficult to do, but we have to make inferences because there are a lot of things that we don't know. When we then write to argue for these interpretations, our job becomes to get readers to make the same inferences we have made, and this is what we have to do as we read our text. And this is what we are starting to do this semester in preparation for academic writing. We're doing it in English. Now, some of you might be familiar with doing these in other languages, and language is a real aspect of this. If we don't have the grammar and the vocabulary, it's twice as hard, which is why you have to read and study your vocabulary and your grammar on a regular basis. He then goes on to talk here at the bottom of page 8 about understanding key disciplinary concepts specific for the discipline. So it's not enough to know general language, you have to know specific language for the discipline. Linguistic, for example, has different language than biology. Here on page 9, he's talking about strategies for synthesizing, analyzing, and responding to critical information. Then he goes on at the bottom of page 9 and talks about writing as an argument. And as we get away from just description and we start talking about analysis, then we're talking about argument. And he goes on to explain here what an argument is. It's not actually a fight. Here at the bottom of the page 9 to the top of page 10, he says it resembles a conversation. Let me turn the page. Between two people who may not hold the same opinions, but they both desire a better understanding of the subject matter under discussion. And then he gives us his favorite analogy, Erwin's favorite analogy, to describe the nature of this argumentative stance is the courtroom. Well, that's nice. I like a courtroom. So we are trying to convince our audience, in this case the jury, that our opinion is enough and back it up with evidence. So writing is argument. Then writing is analysis. And analysis is very important. Everything we do all semester is analysis. Here he goes on to say the assignment may be explicit in its expectations. I'm very explicit in my class. Some instructors are, some instructors aren't. In our class, I'm very explicit. So that will help you. But you have to learn to notice what's going on so we know. Let's look here at the bottom of the page when he says, what does it mean to analyze? One way to think of an analysis is that it asks you to seek how and why questions much more than what questions. An analysis involves doing 3 things. Engage in an open inquiry where the answer is not known at first, which means look for the answer. Try to figure out the answer. Identify meaningful parts of the subject is the second one. And the third one is examine these separate parts and determine how they relate to each other. So break things apart. As I said, break things into parts based on personal experience, cultural norms, current events, learn facts, break them up. And here's what it says. An analysis breaks a subject apart to study it closely, and from this inspection, ideas for writing emerge. Then what you do is you have synthesis. And then when we do synthesis, we put it back together. So then he gives us, on page 11, 3 common types of college writing assignments. And he gives us the closed writing assignment. We're not going to be doing much of this in 201. It's not really the kind of thing that we do here in 201. Then he goes on page 12 to talk about the SemiOpen writing assignment, and that's mainly here what we're doing in 201. Look down here on page 12 in this paragraph, third paragraph in. This kind of writing assignment resembles a kind of archaeological dig. The teacher cordons off an area, hands you a shovel, and says, dig here and see what you find. For example, in our first writing assignment, we're going to be writing about our reading and writing experiences, and I am making that a very specific small with these readings. But within that small little box that I'm creating for you, you can do a lot of things. Notice what he says. He says, be sure to avoid summary and mere explanation. Why? Because we are using analysis as well. Implicit in the topic is the expectation that you will analyze the reading and derive at some insights into patterns and relationships about the subject. So we're looking for analysis, not just description, not just telling a story about my life or about what I'm doing, but analysis. And that is what we are doing for the most part all semester in 201. The third kind of writing assignment that Erwin talks about is the open writing assignment, and this is wide open direction, and it's the hardest to write, and this is mainly more what you're going to be seeing in writing 1 and writing 2. He then goes on to picking and limiting a writing topic, and this has to do when we're giving this kind of wide open assignment. In our class, you're not going to have to worry about that quite as much because I'm controlling the writing topics a lot more, so you really don't have to worry quite as much about that, and you can learn more about that as we go. Then we go into the 3 characteristics of academic writing, which is pretty awesome. I like this section. And we have characteristic number 1. This is on page 14. Characteristic number 1 is clear evidence. We have evidence. We have logic here. Number 2, the dominance of reason over emotions and sensual perception. This means logic. And number 3 is critical thinking. So what makes something academic writing? It has evidence, it has logic, and it has critical thinking. Then on page 15, if we keep on going, Irwin gives us the format of the academic essay, and he gives us characteristics of the critical essay. And he gives us all of these characteristics here. Number 1 is that it makes an argument, which we're doing for our essays. Number 2 is that there is a thesis. There's always a thesis. There is a clear introduction, a body and conclusion. That's what makes something an essay. Then we have support. Okay, we always want to have support in our essays. Then we want to document our sources. We always have sources. Then we go on here to number 6. We have transitions and signal words. Then we are going to be using MLA, and we have grammatical correctness. And that's basically what we're doing this semester. So this is a hard essay. It's complicated. It's a little stretch for us, some of the information. But the most important thing, I think, that we really want to focus on if we're really worried about it is the myths. The myths about academic writing are the most important. And to understand that what we're doing is we're learning. And writing is a circle. We learn a little, we fall backwards, we go forwards, we fall backwards. And so if we can just embrace that and realize it's never going to be perfect, it's always going to take us some time, then we can enjoy the process a little bit more and move on and become better writers, because we can all always become better writers. I believe that, and L. Lenny Irwin believes it too. And that is what is academic writing.
So what was your favorite part of the article? My favorite part were the myths, I think. Myth number 1, 2, and 3 are so very important. The paint by numbers myth, the writers only start writing when they have everything figured out myth, and the perfect first draft myth. If you take nothing else but those 3 things from this article, that those are myths, then you will have learned so much. What we have to know is that writing is recursive, that there is no one way, and there is no such thing as perfection, especially in the first drafts. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the article. This is a great book if you want to go back and read some of the other chapters and articles in this book. There will be some other videos as well. If you liked this video, then give it a like. You know what to do. If you want to subscribe to my page, then you can do that as well. There are some other videos that will be coming out, and there's other videos as well. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I hope you continue to write. Have a great day, everybody.